Welcome to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge, a podcast for tech executives. We provide strategies and tactics to help executives succeed and further their career goals. With interviews from industry experts, leaders, and innovators, this show will surely get you on the edge of your seat with thought-provoking advice on how to stay ahead of the competition. Welcome to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge, a podcast exploring the latest trends, strategies, and insights in technology leadership. We'll discuss the most important topics and ideas shaping the industry today, from emerging technologies to digital transformation and beyond. Join us to learn all of the juicy secrets of tech leaders, their biggest successes and failures, on our quest to understanding that all-important technology edge. Are you ready? Let's get started. So today, our guest is Eric Girard. Eric has over 30 years of experience helping improve the performance of managers and employees. He specializes in developing new managers, focusing on their successful transition to new roles and team management skills. He has a high energy and engaging facilitation style. Eric is a passionate, lifelong learner. As a PADI open water scuba instructor, he is pursuing the rating of Master Scuba Diver Trainer. When not designing or delivering training, he enjoys spending time outdoors with his wife and twin 14-year-old daughters. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Sound like a busy guy.
That's not even half of it.
Yeah, I bet. So tell me a little bit about what got you into working on performance of new managers and employees.
It actually goes back to the Boy Scouts. So I was really heavily involved in the Boy Scouts when I was a kid, when I was a teen, and I worked on the waterfront of my local Boy Scout summer camp. And I just got addicted to seeing kids go from, I can't swim, or I can't row a boat, or I can't paddle a canoe, to I can make this canoe do anything I want. And seeing those light bulbs go off. So it started off when I was a teen myself. I'm like, I like teaching people. So I wound up getting a degree in it, and I wound up getting another degree in it, and ultimately wound up in Silicon Valley teaching managers how to run their teams. And, you know, I started out in new hire orientation, teaching new hires about the company and how it worked. And then I went into employee development, and then eventually got into management development. And I just found that I had a real heart for new managers, you know, helping these folks who have been, you know, excellent individual contributors, excellent employees, and then they get promoted and they're not given any support. It's like, okay, here are the keys, go figure it out. And I've seen a lot of new managers flail and not do well and suffer because of it, and their teams suffer because of it. And then, you know, I'm observing this, and then I get my turn, I get promoted, and I do the same thing. I micromanage. I don't set goals. I do everything wrong and drive my team crazy. And I'm like, you know what? Never again. This is never going to happen again. So we moved to Seattle in 2020. And, you know, with that big move came some big career moves. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to hang out my own shingle, and I'm going to devote my professional life to helping new managers make that transition and land well. So that's how I got here.
That's a really cool story. Because it's, you know, it's a lifelong journey for you. Most of the people that I speak to on here kind of got to where they are after college. You know, they kind of, their head cleared and like, oh, this is the direction I want to go. So what do you see as like the number one struggle for new management people?
The number one is kind of a two-pronged thing. The first is, I think, in 2023, what's needed of managers more than ever is an empathetic mindset. I think that managers need to bring empathy to the table and be able to empathize with their employees, given everything that's going on in the workplace and in the world, you know, and in people's personal lives. I think there needs to be more of an emphasis on, okay, you know what? I got you. I'm listening to you. I hear you. Not necessarily to become a therapist and a counselor, because that's what the employee assistance program is for and all of those things. But, yeah, to say, you know what, as a human being, I'm listening to you and I care about you, and I want to get you pointed north any way I can. So I think empathy is the first thing. The second is, I think a lot of new managers don't make the transition, because there's a fantastic book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I think a lot of folks haven't read that book. And so they go into a new management role thinking, okay, I was an excellent, say, engineer. I was an excellent coder. I was an excellent IT manager. So now I'm a CTO, or now I'm, a first line manager in an engineering organization. And I was successful previously doing tasks, doing things. So I'll just do that more and I'll show people how it's done and I'll set this place straight. I'll do it my way. And what's really needed is a complete mindset shift from, okay, I was rewarded for being excellent at tasks, excellent at coding, excellent at running an IT organization. Now I am rewarded for getting results through people and leading people. And that's a huge mindset shift. And it takes some time to go through, but folks absolutely have to go through it. So I would say developing an empathetic mindset and making a deliberate shift from, being the doer of tasks to a leader of people are two things that are really important.
I actually think that people forget about the second one, but as far as the importance of it. What I do with my program is, one of the first things I do is I assess their leadership style, but I also assess the leadership style of their staff. But before actually giving them the results, I ask them to tell me, what do you think their leadership style is? And what do you think? And most of the time they don't know. And I feel like a lot of executive level people don't pay attention to who's on their team and what their capabilities are, strengths, weaknesses, etc. And so it's almost like they're afraid to delegate anything to those people. But then I ask the question, well, why'd you hire them? There's a reason you hired them. They went through an interview process with you and they stuck out of a group of people. Why? Always remember that and use it going forward, because if you're taking over, especially as a new manager, you're already going to have a little bit of friction from the staff probably. But if the first thing you do is come in and start micromanaging everything they do, you're going to have a massive amount of friction and it makes your transition almost impossible. So, speaking about that, what are your recommendations for new managers for like how to get their team behind them and on board with their agenda that they have to drive forward?
I think there's a lot of getting to know you that needs to happen. There's a lot of, here's who I am, being as transparent as you can be. I'm not suggesting that you disclose everything about yourself, but, be vulnerable and be open to the extent that you're comfortable, and encourage the team to share as well, so that you get to know each other on a personal level. Who is Mike? Who is this person? What's he do for work? How'd he get there? What's he like to do outside of work? To me, that's a big part of my origin story. Is not only am I a CEO of a management development company, but I also have a family, and I love scuba, and I love to mountain bike, and I love the outdoors. Like that. I let people know that right up front, that's a big part of me. So I think first off, some time getting to know each other as people first. And then once you've made that successful transition and you've started to build your empathy muscles, then setting goals would be the first thing I would do is do a group exercise where you set clear, SMART goals, or OKRs, if that's your thing, and make sure that everybody knows who does what, how much, and by when, and make that crystal clear so that nobody's wondering, well, wait a minute, isn't so-and-so supposed to be doing that? So that would be task number one once you make the transition into management.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me because the system that I personally developed years ago when I was working way too many hours every week was something similar. And but basically what I did was I got the group together. We established goals. We set forth what the direction was going to be. Then we established some goals to get us there. We signed them, stakeholders, and then those people drove those goals to completion. And what's different about my approach is every meeting I have, I do a what's working and what's not working. And then after I do the what's not working, I say, all right, who is interested in helping drive this problem to completion? And it might be, a problem with the email server, and the help desk person might want to drive, the leader of the help desk might want to push that put through. That's good because they can now work closely with the email administrator and learn a little bit about that person, but also they get to work with each other on a task that has to be completed. And I get a lot of pushback sometimes, like, well, but I'm not the email administrator. I understand that, but you're just the guy responsible for making sure that the meetings that need to happen, and that the tasks are getting done. You're becoming a project manager, and you're managing other people. That's what you're doing. So I think that's actually really interesting. Let's talk about empathy, though, because a lot of people talk about empathy. How do you define empathy yourself?
To me, empathy is all about not just, listening to someone and say, wow, sucks to be you. Like that's too bad. But really figuratively walking a mile in somebody's shoes, feeling what they're feeling, kind of going through what they're going through. And it doesn't take a whole lot to get there. I love Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence. And I would encourage any new manager to read Daniel Goleman's work or do some reading on EI and EQ, and just being able to think, okay, when you're listening to somebody, you can listen and think about, okay, what am I going to say when they're done talking? I can listen with some sympathy and kind of come back with a stock answer of, wow, yeah, that sucks, too bad. Or you can come back with, okay, I'm listening deeply. I really hear what's being said and what's not being said. And I'm with you. Like we're sitting side by side on a park bench and I'm listening closely to you. And I feel what you feel. And again, I want to reassure folks that, I'm not suggesting that you become some kind of a crazy empath, or that you have to become a counselor. Not that. That's what the employee assistance program is for. That's what therapists are for. But just connecting with somebody on a deep human level and saying, I'm listening to you. I hear you. I really hear you. Asking questions like, how are you? No, really, how are you? Can be very, very powerful in demonstrating empathy to get somebody to open up and talk to you, so that then together you can work through solutions, maybe using a coaching framework.
Makes sense. I think the empathy aspect, I really like how you tied it to emotional intelligence. It was an area I struggled with early on, because I've always, in my family, everything's been really blunt from when I was a young child. And so that's what I learned was, just be blunt, say what's on your mind. But then you learn that, not everybody's that way, and not everybody appreciates that approach. So while I appreciate directness, someone else might not. And so I had to learn over time, in order to be an effective manager, I had to really understand the other person. And I think that's where people fall off, is they think it's just about learning about their hobbies or whatever, but it really isn't. It's like making that actual connection and being intentional about it. Like you said, it's not the, oh, gee, that sucks, too bad. You're listening for a reason. There's an intent behind why you're listening. And maybe that's to help them at work a little more, maybe to be a little more understanding because they're going through some problems or something. And like one of the things I always like to do is, when you have an employee and they're on a trajectory like this, and all of a sudden they start going like this, get to the bottom of why. Because if they were climbing the hill and all of a sudden they're falling backwards, something's wrong. And too many managers just go, oh, Joe used to be a great employee, but now Joe, he's dropping the ball all the time. I need to get rid of him. That's the wrong approach, if you ask me. The first thing you should be doing is figuring out why Joe's falling off, and maybe help Joe. That's kind of an interesting thing. So, one of the things, you say in your, what we talked about in your intro is that you help people transitioning to management. So what's unique about that? Like, why would someone need extra attention when they're transitioning to management?
Well, here's what I've observed, and this is after 30 years in industry and 20 years in Silicon Valley, is that quite often folks get promoted because they're awesome at fill in the blank. You're an amazing engineer. You're an amazing project manager. And, now you're just bumped up to lead the team. So my own story, I was in a Silicon Valley company. I was on a team of 3, and I had expressed to my manager, maybe someday I'd like to be a manager. He said, okay, and kind of filed that away. And then he came to me a couple of months later and said, okay, I've thought about it. I want to promote you. I want you to lead your team. I want you to lead a team. I said, great. He says, I'm going to have you lead your team. And oh, by the way, one of them is a problem and I want them gone. And it's like, oh, geez. So right away, I'm a manager and my boss just sandbagged me into doing his dirty work and managing somebody out. So what I should have done was been intentional about learning how to set goals, delegate, establish trust, do coaching and feedback. And what I did instead was immediately got into the performance management process and bypassed all that stuff. So I think what happens to new managers is they get stuck into the details and they don't pull back and think, okay, now wait a minute, this is, for all intents and purposes, this is a new team. I'm a new leader. This is a massive change. We need to do some change management and, helping folks understand who you are, get to know them, help them understand why this change was made and so on, so that people kind of ease into the change and then set roles and responsibilities and be really clear about that. I did none of that. I went right into, okay, how am I going to manage this person out? And so I ignored all the basic blocking and tackling, and it did not go well. This person wound up on a performance improvement plan, and I kind of figured that they would just give up and quit, and they didn't. So they survived the PIP. So now I've got a very disgruntled employee on my team who is going to do just the bare minimum to stay on the team and not get canned. So it just everything I could have done wrong, I did wrong in that. So if I had it to do over again, and I would suggest this to any manager, is that when you inherit a team or when you're promoted over a team or brought in to lead a team, spend time, no matter what, spend time getting to know folks, make sure that people know you and trust you and you can trust them. Sort of go first and extend trust first. And then start with setting goals, delegating appropriately, running a SWOT analysis, and being an excellent coach would be some of the first things I would say. That's what you need to learn, rather than diving deep into the stuff.
That makes me wonder, in your experience, where do companies fail at preparing people who are on that management trajectory? Where do they fail to prepare them?
I just think they fail to prepare them. I just think they don't. Some companies, some bigger companies have some form of management development, and some companies have excellent management development. But my big beef is that quite often the management development comes after you're promoted. What I would like to see and what I would like to do, my dream job would be to come in and work with a cohort of high potentials who have been identified as people who are about to be promoted. Work with them for, say, the first 3 months before they transition into their new jobs, and bingo, they're ready to go. And that's why I wrote my book, is, to get this knowledge into the hands of people so that, they've got some idea of what they're stepping into before they actually go.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your book.
So the book is called Lead Like a Pro, The Essential Guide for New Managers. And it is all about what we've been talking about. So chapter 1, it starts with bring the empathy, and chapter 9 is all about managing change. And in between that are little nuggets on how to make that transition, how to set goals, how to delegate, how to do a SWOT analysis with your team, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, how to build trust using Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions model, coaching and feedback using a couple of really simple models, how to reward and recognize your team in a way that doesn't break the bank, and then how to manage change. And then one thing that I do at the end of the book, which is something I do at the end of all my programs, is I ask folks to make a personal grand plan. So go back over the pages you've dog-eared, go back over your notes, and write a development plan for yourself that you're going to implement. What will you do differently as a result of spending time with this book or this program, so that folks, actually take action and get some benefit from it. And then there's a ton of resources that are at the back of the book for folks who want to learn more.
The change management aspect that you brought in is very intriguing to me because, especially because I'm working with technology managers. And so they should understand the concept of what happens when you need a change management system. Like, why is it there? What's its purpose? And yet that never seems to get applied to their team. And they don't think about the fact that new manager going in place is almost as big a deal as completely changing the technology stack that you're using for your software. And I know that if they changed the technology stack, they'd make sure to look for the areas where they needed to like fix things and, promote changing this section this way and that section of the software that way. I don't understand why they don't see that with staff. What do you think is the roadblock there?
It's a statistic I actually quote in my change management course, and that is that when folks are considering change, there are two aspects to consider. There's the social or technical side of change. Most folks focus on the technical side of change because it's easier. It's easier to quantify. We can change from producing 10 widgets a month to 100 widgets a month. Like that's an easy thing to quantify and to go after. Getting the project plans together, getting your Gantt charts right, all of that, piece of cake. The people side of change is messy. Dealing with human emotions is difficult and uncomfortable. And so a lot of folks ignore it or downplay it. And yet that's the part that will cause a change management effort of any size, whether it's bringing in a new manager or whether it's, overhauling your learning management system or something like that. That's what will kill a change initiative, is resistance to change because people were not bought in, because you didn't kind of speak to their hearts and minds at the beginning.
That makes sense, because if and actually it makes me think back, retail managers have that same kind of a problem when they switch stores, because generally speaking, they're put in a new store because there's a problem there. And so a lot of times new managers are coming into a situation where either A, the position was just created because of growth, or B, someone got terminated and wasn't doing a good job in that role, and now they're expected to take that role. Or the third option is the person just moved on and that role opened and they moved in. But either way, that manager is going to have their own ideas of how the road forward looks. And what they forget is, you're absolutely right. They forget they got to get buy-off from their team on that too. And the team has the institutional knowledge as well, that if you bring up, hey, I want to do this, you got to listen when they say, that's not going to work. Here's why that's not going to work. And if you don't listen, well, first of all, they won't be behind you. And secondly, down the road, you're going to face a disaster and they're going to kind of look at you and go, told you. I mean, it doesn't make you look very like a very exceptional manager when your first interaction with your staff is to dictate what's going to happen. I'm sure there are situations where, when I was a retail manager years ago, I took over a store where employee theft was at a super high level. So yeah, I'm going to come in and I'm going to set some rules. But I'm not going to like beat you over the head with it. And that's, I think, where some new managers, they get like that taste of, I guess I'm just going to use the word power, and authority. And they think that wielding that is a fun thing. And meanwhile, they're wondering, how come all the good people are leaving? And how come I can't keep the good people? And that's probably why. So that brings me, you mentioned about earlier on about doing a SWOT analysis. And I think that's an interesting concept. Tell me how someone would conduct a SWOT analysis like on their staff.
Yeah, so a SWOT analysis is deceptively simple, and there's two ways to do it. The traditional way is to look internally at the team's strengths and weaknesses. And what I would suggest is, if you do this, is you can draw yourself a 2x2 grid or just lay something out on a doc. Strengths. What are the strengths of the team? And be verbose. Don't just take one-word answers. Like, really be descriptive about what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses of the team. And then looking external to the team, and I'm assuming that this is a team that is inside a corporation. And so looking external, like to other teams or to the larger corporate environment, or maybe to the economic environment. What are the opportunities that are available to you? And what are the threats? And this doesn't have to take long. I mean, you can bang out a SWOT analysis in 15 minutes just to get started. What I would suggest, though, is maybe you get started and do one on your own, just kind of noodle on it on your own, and then come to the team and say, hey, let's brainstorm. Let's be honest here. This is Las Vegas. This is a safe place. So let's talk a little bit about our strengths, our weaknesses, and what are the opportunities and threats that are facing us from outside the team, and really blow those 4 boxes out of that 2x2 matrix. So it can be really fast and kind of fun to do when you get people really thinking about it, especially when you reassure them that this isn't going to be used against anybody. It's just an opportunity for us to really look clinically at the team and say, okay, how are we doing? Do we have gaps in the team's knowledge that we need to fill? And then how do we do that? So that's one way to do it. And then there's an article in the Harvard Business Review that talks about flipping the SWOT analysis on its head. And you start externally. You start with the opportunities and threats first and look external first, which then informs your internal strengths and weaknesses. So it's just flipping it slightly, but it changes your mindset a bit. And again, no matter which way you do it, the idea is to be as complete as you can. No trite one-word answers, like really blow it out.
Oh, that's great advice, because I think people forget that they can do a SWOT analysis on pretty much any situation. Your team, ideas you have, you really couldn't sit down and be like, okay, if I'm gonna implement this idea that I have, what's going to happen? You know, what are the good things about it? What are the bad things about it? There's ways to do that, and I think more people need to. So, you know, one of the things I was intrigued by a little bit is you mentioned that like it takes to like chapter 9 in your book to get to delegation. And so to me, that kind of infers that everything that comes before that needs to be in place, in your opinion, before even getting to that, like, I want to call it the tactical work, you know? So, everything before that's, if you define strategy as more like esoteric and tactical as like the day-to-day hands-on work, I think that you're right. I think the strategy has to be put in place first. And that includes things like, you know, doing the SWOT analysis, getting your team on board, et cetera. So it's interesting to me. So that's a long, so like, why does it appear so late in the book? Like what's the thought process there? What supersedes it before you get to delegation?
Actually, delegation is the 4th chapter.
Fourth chapter. Okay. Still 4 in. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, chapter 1 is all about empathy. Chapter 2 is making the transition. Chapter 3 is goal setting, and then we get to delegation.
Yeah. So then that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just, you know, to me, it follows a flow that seems to make sense. Like it's almost like a cookbook for a new manager. It's like, you know what, if you're a new manager, if you follow the book chapter by chapter, you'll be on your way to creating a good, solid team that trusts you and trusts each other, and gets stuff done. But I mean, it can also be used as a reference. You can just dive in. It's like, okay, wait a minute. I need to learn how to do some coaching. How do I do that? Okay. Flip over to, you know, page 85 and there we go.
Get the reminder. When does the book come out?
Yeah. The tentative date is September 20th. It may get pushed a little bit. So, stay tuned.
Perfect. Well, why don't you let people know where they can find you, how to get a copy of the book when it comes out? Something I'm definitely going to do, because it sounds like you have some good advice in there that I can use within my coaching program. So
yeah, well, I'd be happy to get you a copy. Easiest thing is to find me on LinkedIn, Eric Girard on LinkedIn. And you could hit me at my website, girardtrainingsolutions.com, and Girard is spelled Girard. Those are probably the 2 easiest things. I've also got an Instagram feed, eric.p.girard. So those are 3 easy ways to find me.
Perfect. Well, I encourage people to reach out to you. I mean, you have a lot of great insights. This time flew by today. So really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks. This was a blast.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. We hope you've had a great time with us, learning everything you need to know to stay ahead of the technology curve. And remember, be curious, be updated on all the latest trends, and show them who's boss. Until next time, we'll be back with plenty more techie tips and tricks so you can stay on top of your game.